Hello, my name is Mirka Hann and I am resident artist at Velce Creative. As part of the Artist of the Week, I've decided to do a demonstration of how to make a fermentation jar. This jar is quite a strong tie to the culture of my origin. I am Czech, where pickling cabbage was a part of annual ritual. The fermentation process to pickle cabbage in this jar happens in an airtight unit where lactic acid is produced, and lactic acid in turn produces bacteria called lactobacilli and lowers the pH levels of the food inside. This means that only good bacteria can be formed and no bad bacteria can live inside this environment. The design of the pot is crucial for this process to take place. The pot has a very big gallery, as you can see here. When lid is put on, water gets poured into this gallery and this creates an airtight seal. This airtight seal, however, allows for gases which are formed inside during the fermentation process to escape out, but nothing else gets in. This process is called anaerobic respiration. So I've chopped up this cabbage and mixed it with salt and a little bit of caraway seeds on the second day of lockdown, and it's been fermenting since, and it's just about perfect now. Full of vitamin C. It contains some vitamins B and plenty of good bacteria called probiotics. Now let me show you how one of these are made. So this is my makeshift lockdown pottery. And I am going to be demonstrating a very small fermentation jar with 6 pounds of clay. I can make a larger one, perhaps another time. So first of all, we will need to center the clay. You will need to take time about this, because if you don't center your clay properly, it's just not gonna happen. So for those who don't know me, as part of my residency, I run pottery studio at Salisbury Art Centre, which is part of Velce Creative, where I also teach regular pottery classes. And I miss all my students. So, hopefully I will see you all soon again. I'm still centering the clay. And like I said, take your time doing this, because you can't rush this process. to make this jar is to leave, when you start pulling up the clay, a substantial amount of material at the top, enough so that you can make the gallery. So I'm going fairly sort of medium speed here. When I started up, when I was slapping the clay into shape, I was going very slowly. Now I'm speeding up a bit, but I'm still not going crazy fast. And I'm still centering. But as I am centering, I'm also starting now to work on the base. With this jar, you will not be turning the bottom, so you don't need to have enough material at the bottom to trim it or take it away afterwards. So I'm gonna make probably base which is about 7 millimeters thick. Still working on the centering and on the base. It's very important to compress the base, because what you're doing there is compacting the particles of clay and making the base stronger and preventing S-cracks due to weakness of the material down there from happening. So just last few bits of centering. Now I will start pulling up. When you're making a cylindrical form, which this pot to begin with has to be, you want to keep the shape of your pot as conical as possible. In the initial pulse. So every time I get to the top, and as you can see I'm keeping lots of material there, I color in. And I recenter the rim. And I'm doing the same again. I'm at the top, recentering the rim and keeping quite a lot of material at the top. I'm just going to remove some of the sludge gathering on the inside with a sponge on a stick before I start forming the gallery. And I will also use a rib to take off the sludge that's gathering on the outside. So I don't want to have a pronounced belly at this stage because I am very keen on keeping the form sturdy for what's and strong for what's about to happen. Okay. Really good tip when you're learning to throw: don't forget to breathe. It's very important. Right, so I've got the beginnings of the gallery. I'm now going to start working a bit more on the shape of the belly of the pot. Slow the wheel down. So 6 pounds of clay is enough to make sauerkraut from one very large head of cabbage, or 2 smaller ones, which I think is good enough amount for a family. If you want to have a fresh sauerkraut every now and then. When I was little, my parents actually had a jar which took 100 kilograms of cabbage. And I remember as a child, I was put in to push the cabbage down when we were compacting them, or packing them. The cabbage was grated on a huge grater. It was a child-size grater. And then the family recipe to make the sauerkraut is 1% of salt to your however much cabbage you are using. So I'm just working some more on the gallery, making it wider. You can also put in small amount of onion. I think into a jar this size I would probably put a half of an average size onion and handful of caraway if you want, but that's not necessary. Just last finishing touches. So that's the jar. I will now measure how big the lid needs to be. Okay, that's the measurement. So for the lid, I've got 1.5 pounds of clay for the lid, and I will basically make straight up kind of a dog bowl shape pot which will sit on top of the gallery. You know, it was really quite interesting immediately after the lockdown that the first thing I could think about was sauerkraut and the goodness and the comfort that all those childhood memories comes with it. And I think it was on the second day of the lockdown I rushed with my daughter to Tesco's, where we bought quite a lot of cabbage. We got some strange looks, I must say, and then we made it together for the pot you saw earlier. So just in case you wanted to know some interesting factoids about sauerkraut, in 1768, on his Pacific voyage, Captain James Cook took sauerkraut on his ship. At that time, in the years between 15 and 1800s, it is believed that about 2 million people died of scurvies, and scurvies were a huge problem on sea voyages. And as an experiment to combat scurvies, Captain Cook took with him quite a load of sauerkraut. He had a quota for each of his men to receive 2 pounds of sauerkraut per week. And guess what? Not a single man on this 3-year voyage died of scurvies, result for cabbage. So if this doesn't get you interested in sauerkraut, I don't know what will. Right. Okay, so that's the lid. Which I will trim tomorrow. So in terms of making, this is stage 1, and the next step is to kind of make finishing touches and trim it down. So Give me a moment. Here is a pot I made yesterday from the same amount of clay. So I'm gonna put it back on the wheel. And I will skim it down. Okay. We're stuck. Yep. So I'm just gonna give it a bit of a trim. Because I made it yesterday, it is now leather hard. So I can do this shaping. I can use my ribs just to smooth the whole shape. I haven't underwired this pot yesterday because I will underwire it now. And now that's the lid. Which I will just tidy up. Blob of clay out there. My pot in the kitchen had some handles and some lugs, but because this pot is so small, I don't think it needs them, so I won't be making them, but it does need a little trim on the lid. why not? So there it goes. One small fermentation jar. Thank you for watching and see you soon. Hello again. Thank you for watching my demonstration. I hope you enjoyed it. It certainly felt right for me to be teaching again. I just got a few more tips before we wrap up. This is the stone that I use in this pot to weigh down the cabbage after I chop it up and first pack it in. I wrap it in a clean gauze, like this, and then I put it on top of the cabbage. After about 2 weeks I take it out. I also remove the water that naturally happens inside, and I close the lid and leave it for a little bit longer. Always check that the water is there, don't let it dry out. The pickling process within this jar is natural. There is no other material or ingredients than cabbage, salt and a little bit of caraway and maybe a little bit of onion. That's up to you. There is no vinegar present in this process. Oh yeah, and it meant to smell like this. So last thing I need to do is dobrou chuť. Enjoy.